Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to day 3 of the Housing Oregon Conference. It has been such a delight to meet and connect with everybody here, and the stories that you have been telling me of your different properties and projects around the state are very inspiring. And I really enjoy working with all of you to serve the populations that we serve. Today, I appreciate you all accommodating our change of schedule, and we're going to talk about the future of property management in Oregon. I know that a number of us are really struggling with property management. And we're facing, cost escalation. We have insurance going way up, and we're trying to serve really vulnerable populations in buildings that weren't necessarily built for them. So I'm really delighted to welcome our panelists, William Allen from New Narrative, Julia from New Narrative as well, and Maria Elena Guerrera from Evolve and Farm Worker Housing. So I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, and I'm going to ask them if they can, talk briefly about their organization, and tell us a little bit about their portfolio. The number of units that they have, the populations that they serve, and we'll just get started with that.
Cool. Morning, everyone. Thanks for coming here today and having this chat with us. Julie and I, since we're both representing New Narrative, are kind of split the overview. But again, I'm Will Allen. I'm the Vice President of Operations for New Narrative. New Narrative is a community mental health nonprofit that works in the metro area, Washington County and Multnomah County, and has been around for about 45 years. We specialize in supporting adults and transition age youth that have really intense mental health needs, as well as pretty severe trauma histories and histories of houselessness. And we provide a variety of services to that population across residential, clinical, and peer services. And we serve around 2,500 people a year. We're about 350 staff members, and by the spring, we'll be 46 sites between all those programs.
Good morning. I have to say, I'm kind of disappointed. I thought this room was going to be full because everybody wants to know about property management. I just think that it's too early and people was drinking too much last night. Well, we were drinking too much last night. Thank you. Anyway, Maria Elena Guerra, everybody calls me Meg. I am a recovered property management person. And I said recover because I did that for a long time. And it's not that I have given up because it's on my blood. I can do any day without knowing anything about property management. I'm gonna start with telling you about FHDC and Evolve Workforce and Property Management Service. Two different organizations, two different nonprofits. So since the beginning, you are hopefully understanding that doing your own property management doesn't even pay for your executive director, that you have to put it in two organizations. So keep that in mind when you think about doing your own property management. Evolve was created back in 2016 because FHDC recognized that our residents needed to be treated as human beings with respect. So there we go. We embark in 2016 and we say we are going to create Evolve. By 2016, FHDC owned 380 units. We, at that point, we were doing, by the way, our own property management. But since we couldn't support it, we jumped into third-party property management. I'm laughing about that, you can see that. This is still painful. And today we have almost 500 units, and Evolve is doing all our property management. We can talk on details later, but right now we have in Evolve 20 plus staff for 11 properties located in 6 different cities, 3 different counties. We are growing, it's slow, but I think the recipe for property management is still to be discovered. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Julia Howde, and I'm the Director of Property Management at New Narrative. I oversee our day-to-day operations that we have in our property management department, so I can definitely relate to the daily struggles with just property management in general, let alone serving the populations that we serve.
And just to add a few more things about our housing portfolio. So we have a housing continuum that goes from licensed residential, so that's 24 hours a day, treatment and housing paired together, out to transitional housing, then to permanent supportive housing, which is a decent part of our portfolio, and generally affordable housing. Right now, we have around 181 units in our portfolio, and we just started managing third party as well on July 1st, and so manage an additional 77 units.
So I'm going to run through a couple questions for the audience here and just ask you to raise your hand just so that we all know that we share in the same struggles. So who here has had trouble finding a vendor to be your property manager? Who believes that we need to spend our resources on supporting our frontline staff so that we can reduce turnover? Okay. How many of you are grappling with high tenant turnover? Okay. Who believes that there's room for improvement in human-centered, holistic culture within your property management? Okay. Who has found unique challenges in managing PSH? Okay. Who right now is struggling to stabilize their portfolio due to rent collection? Okay. And who has found it difficult to balance community needs with operational requirements? Yeah. And then who is finding it difficult to scale your operations while maintaining quality? Okay. And then who is working on or finds the need for more inclusive and racially equitable property management practices? Okay. So, that's a good starting spot that we all have some very, very shared struggles. And I just want to recognize Liz Winchester for running POMWOG, which is the Property and Asset Management Working Group. I would know nothing without Liz, so thank you. We need to come together as an industry and work on this. Housing Oregon and the Housing Alliance and New Narrative and all of you are talking about what are we going to do and how are we going to do it. And I hope that this conversation here at the conference can continue and we can all work together and tackle this difficult problem. So I'm going to now turn it back to our panelists. And so what realistic conversations need to happen regarding the actual costs of operating mission-driven property management services? Are we resourcing the systems adequately?
No. No, this is it's a really good question. And like when I think about property management, I want to zoom out for a second and look at the intersection of what's happening in affordable housing in Oregon, because there's kind of two things that are coming together to pinch this part of the service provision in particular. in the last few years, we've invested a massive amount of capital dollars in the actual construction of affordable housing within the state. And that's amazing. That's great, right? We've asked voters to come and to give us hundreds of millions of dollars, and they've approved that. And we're seeing more PSH units come online than we've ever had before. And then additionally, at the same time, we've had the pandemic. And I would guess for a lot of people in this room, we certainly have seen it in our portfolio, acuity and complexity of needs have increased. Trauma histories are more common, right? Like I was talking to a few different providers in the last quarter who have housing sites that 5 or 6 years ago, they wouldn't have considered PSH, but they do today because of the changing needs of the people that are coming into them. So we have that intersection. And then at the same time, one of the things that I've always kind of found as a head scratcher for property management is, we take someone, you're gonna pay them 18 to 20 bucks an hour. You're gonna not give them any training or expertise in working with people with really complex needs and trauma histories and mental health needs. And then you're gonna say, why aren't you successful? Right? Well, at the same time, for a permanent supportive housing team, I wouldn't dream of doing that, right? We'd give them de-escalation training, trauma-informed trainings. We'd have group supervisions to wrap around them. We'd have internal QI teams to give them support on really challenging situations they encounter. And from my perspective, that's where we are under-resourcing property management, and we're gonna continue to get the same results that we see today if we don't change how we do that. And probably the 3 ways that I look at that is, the reality is for PSH units in particular, you have to have a higher staff ratio for property management as well. They're super important to housing stabilization and eviction prevention, right? Like you have to have them around. The reality is too, you're probably gonna have to pay them a bit better than we currently do, because if you have the option to go work at a site that doesn't have people with those backgrounds and those needs, eventually people are they're gonna burn out and they're gonna choose to go to the easier site for the same pay. And then, like I was saying, all the training and resources. Like we need technical assistance for both mission-based property management and for traditional commercial property managers. And a resource space for them to go to, just like I come from a social work background, and I think, we staff things together, right? Collaboratively as a team when we have challenging situations, and that we should be including property management in that and extending those resources to them.
We are all Republicans when we talk about property management, because we want the baby when it's here. It doesn't cost money. Once we have the baby, nobody wants to take care of it. That's my thinking about property management. And it's happening more and more. I believe that we need to look at the pro forma. We need to do a really push for property management to get paid, to property managers doing their job, and really analyze what are the needs out there. Back in 2016, when Evolve was doing third-party property management, by the way, we fired ourselves because we were doing such a bad job. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna sugarcoat anything that I'm gonna tell you today, because you need to know this. We need, as an industry, know what are the challenges. We were charging 5% of collected rent as a property management fee, 5%. I know, was crazy, but property management, third party, we wanna go to those 2,000 units that we were supposed to, it's the recipe. You break even when you go to 2,000. Well, as many organizations that are in the 2,000+ and they are not breaking even. So we need to go back to the pro forma. We need to tell the truth to our investors, because the problem starts there. The investors say, operational costs are too high. Where do we go first? Resident services already out of the picture, by the way. There are not many people that pay for resident service above the line. We are still, we're lucky. We got maybe 6-7% as a property management fee. Well, that's not working. If you wanna ask me, Meg, how much is it then? I don't know. I don't know, because believe me, every community that we open has its own need. Will and Julia, I don't know, Julia, I don't know if you have a number, I will say, I will throw a 10% at least there. But I think we need to do a true analysis of the communities that we serve. You guys serve a community that is high in need. I have a community that is, there are families. I have individuals, I have seniors, but and they have mental health issues, don't get me wrong. But still, I don't have the same needs that an organization as you guys have. So those analyses needs to happen. We need to have the conversations. After this meeting, we have to go back to our investors and say, you guys are killing us. And by the way, how many property managements are out there in the lobby? Does anybody know? What is your organization? Perfect, welcome. You are with us. A few years ago, those that are in the industry for more than 15 years know that that room will be packed with property management companies. Not today, that's a sign. And I wanna talk, how many owners do we have in here? 2, 3, 4, representing, I would love to see CEOs in here because they are the ones that can make changes. How many from Oregon Housing and Community Service directly linked to property management are here? 2? None? On the back. Okay, so we need to come as an industry and say, this is the reality. And as usual, yes, it's about money. And it's about funded property management. That is not the usual property management, not to talk bad about the private sector, because believe me, they are doing, even though you don't see it, they are doing the job that nobody wants to do. Thank you. Julia.
Yes. I will add that one of the conversations that needs to be had is what the actual cost of attracting talent for these properties. I think a lot of times the notion is that you can just hire your typical property manager for these sites, and that is not the case. So we definitely need to look at what it costs to pay somebody that is mission aligned to work at these properties, because they've got the layer of not just property management, not just the serving eviction notices, non-payment notices, but there's also that additional level of care. And so we need to look at, what are we paying these people? Are they getting health care? Are they getting benefits? Because we have to take care of them as well as frontline workers.
You have a question over there?
Definitely. So kind of like what Meg was saying, a lot of times we won't know until we actually analyze the property and the needs that it has. And this is, we're not even looking at just the property management needs. We're looking at the needs of that property as a community. So I can tell you, for example, one of the sites that we have right now, we have about 71 units split between 2 sites. This is not a conventional regular property. This is a property that needs definitely a lot more. And the wages that we were considering for the site manager, not a live-in position, but a site manager position, we were working with our client on offering between, like, just to put it in real dollars, between $25 and $30 an hour for a site manager. If you go on Indeed and you look at the wages for a site manager, they're not that great. And a lot of times they don't get any benefits. And if they're able to live on site, that's usually all they get. Hey, you get your free apartment just to do your day-to-day jobs. But that's not what they're doing. They're not just going in and filling out paperwork. They're dealing with the needs of the community and the needs of the tenant, which actually is a specialized skill in my opinion. So that wage range is able to attract maybe even people that have some social work experience, rather than just your conventional property manager. Because if you put the typical property manager wages out there, you might attract somebody with experience, but what's going to happen is they're going to burn out because they didn't realize they had to also do a little bit of social work, a little bit of case manager work. They're not realizing that.
Who wants to deal with problems every day? And who wants to be, in some ways, attacked, physically attacked in some cases? You know, it's a very tough industry. I remember back in 2013, we were looking into even how we make the office of the manager safe. We needed to build now 2 doors, an emergency button, so you can call for help when somebody tried to tell you, I don't have money to pay rent, in a different way that I'm saying it right now. So yep, yep. Well, one thing that we all, I hope, are aware is that that's not happening only in property management. That's happening in all levels. If you ask me, you know, I hire a person one day and the next day that's supposed to show up for work, they don't show up. So it's not property management, but I have a question for you, a follow-up question. And Sheila, I know you have a question too. How close do you work with your owner? Oh, so you and I'm very similar. Okay. So, and I was hoping to talk about this later on, but it seems that the opportunity is here. Kevin, if you're okay with, so we had that problem in Evolve. And it basically, what we shift after our experience of not doing good property management, we shift our goals and we say, we're gonna focus on workforce development. That helped us to create a pipeline of individuals that are interested in the property management business. Again, we are true to them and we say the good, bad, and ugly of property management. I put good first. And we take these people with no training, We ask for only if they have finished high school, perfect. Because actually we prefer that. Those who are there that has had the opportunity to work sometimes with property management that has been in the industry for a while, you know that it's better just to train a new person. So that's how we are kind of working in creating a pipeline to help us that when somebody leave, we have somebody else in there. Now we go back to the first question, cost, because you always have to have somebody in there that is ready to jump into that position that has left. That person might not stay forever there. It might be like a floater. Every time that somebody goes on vacation, you have that person to jump in for emergency cases as well. It's a perfect situation, it's not, but it helps us a lot to go back to our pipeline of students and say, we have an opportunity, are you ready to jump? That is what we are experiencing that is working better for us. Not the total, perfect situation, but I think at this point, at least I can sleep. Sheila, you have a question? Unless somebody else wanna jump in?
I can probably add like
Yeah,
one or two more
yeah,
things to
yeah.
that. Yeah, so we actually have had a decent time hiring people. Like surprisingly, it's been fairly decent for property management. We are in the metro area, so that's a big difference, obviously, between Central Oregon. I will say, very similar to what Mega's saying, is that we tend to target other people in the mental health field. Like one of our really good portfolio managers was going to get a social work degree. And when we advertise all about how we're really mission-based, and we talk about like integration of services and how like this is way more than a traditional property management position and what our culture is. And that's, I mean, it's hard to say whether that brings people in or not, but it certainly keeps them because our retention's pretty high too. And for her, it was great because we were flexible around her going to school, and then she was melding together what she was learning in her master's degree program for social work with what she was doing as a property manager and like understanding the entire system. So we did a lot of investment to like do a lot of teaching around the like wider mental health system and social work system. So like she got a lot more out of the job than just like pay and her everyday experience. So. Are you guys good?
Sheila had a question.
That is exactly, thank you for saying that, because that was part of my question. And I've been finding within our own agency that staffing is a real challenge for us. I mean, 10 in 1 year is a lot of turnover for us. And so it's been a learning curve for us. One of the things that I have, that we're coming back to in the acknowledgement of is that our frontline staff, whether they're front desk, people coming and going, or property management, that's me. But and our third parties. But I mean, really, it's an operation into where can they go from here with skill sets? Can I get them that are going to empower them to be filled up in their position to better understand the clients that are walking through the door? Because I don't want them feeling exactly what you said, what they did. I want to give them the tools to be able to put the wheel, which may also be the sergeant of the police department cell phone number on speed dial. I mean, there are those things that we want to need to protect. But I feel like I'm at the space and the time and where we're at. You hit on the head. I mean, I'm seeing so much more trauma and crisis-oriented people coming through our door who are dealing with that, have had a shift in just their space. And I mean, how are we teaching motivational interviewing? Are we teaching, how to sit back and listen? So I just feel like there's skill sets, and I don't know if that's something that we're doing with the technical, that's awesome. But I feel like that's an area that we're going to, even to the point that I'm trying to get some housing navigation certification. I am really looking at, gosh, should I be looking at peer mentorship type things? I mean, I really am looking outside the box.
Yeah, and I want to add on to that, like, so when we hire people, especially if they're from like a more traditional property management background, we kind of have them come on board and we have a really intensive onboarding. And I'm basically like, remember all this stuff about 72-hour notices and evictions and 3014s or whatever. The rest of it, like, just put it to the side for a second and like bear with us. And then we run them through what I would consider pretty traditional social work and mental health training around like, understanding systems of oppression, like for people, understanding like trauma, histories and trauma cycles for people that have been through multiple housing situations. We teach them advanced de-escalation training techniques. And then also one of the big things, and again, this is coming from my own background, but we do a lot of things that you see traditionally in mental health, where it's like someone's in a team, like a community-based team, and they have a really challenging situation. No one expects them to just go home and deal with that on their own, right? It's like, hey, can I like we have like management and leadership inside property management, but also directly in the mental health teams next to us. I mean, Julia has gone multiple times. I've encouraged her when she first started. I was like, hey, you should go talk to Haven or Allie, who are our VPs of clinical and peer services, and bring up that situation and see what, because they actually have better expertise in that area than I do. And so really like, and then even doing like weekly meetings and weekly supervisions around these really difficult situations and getting additional supports for people, so they don't feel like they're all on their own in those situations in those buildings. Because I think that, at least from what I've seen in situations, it probably can be a pretty lonely place to be as a property manager if you don't feel like you have those connections.
Oh, Liz, you have a question?
So, I was actually gonna ask how you handle kind of the other thing, which is the subsidiary notices, is the legal part of it. But one of the challenges that I've seen in the Advocacy is that we have property managers and being told that they need to look, being told that they need to be a social service provider, and they need to be kind of hard line, focused on the asset. They need to understand enough about the legal side. They need to be able to, I don't know, it feels like we're asking them to kind of play both sides of that role. And then they're dealing with and help with it. And I wonder how you guys deal with that, especially as the rules around notices, the rules around compliance, all of that stuff is so much more complicated. And there's so much more for every property manager to know, in addition to the situations we would do.
So I can share with you that our internal portfolio, our policies are a little bit different than the typical Oregon 10-day notices. For example, we don't give out 10-day notices until after the 14th of the month. But again, that's for our internal portfolio. When you have a third-party client, that might be a little bit different. You're more bound by following the criteria that they need. But for our internal portfolio, we're doing notices later to take into consideration that a lot of the tenants have subsidized housing and they're getting payments from different organizations. So those do tend to come in a little late, and we don't want to penalize the tenant for, a check that gets cut on the 7th instead of the 1st. And for our external clients, we build policies around what we know of the community needs, but also around what our client needs are as well. So if our client tells us that they have to make their mortgage payment on the 12th, for example, we know what period of time we have to actually collect the rent and serve any delinquency notices that are necessary. But we try to add layers, which does complicate things a little bit more. So maybe before we actually give the 10-day notice, we're actually issuing a courtesy notice to not only not be so traumatic to the tenant and getting, this notice that you have 10 days to pay or you need to get out, but also to still meet the needs of our client.
We do exactly the same. We have a say. We are not in the eviction business. We try to balance notices with a lot of education, meaning our resident service staff play a big role on this. It is true that we try to make sure that our managers, our site managers, have that humanity in them, because we just can't detach them. Sure, there are social workers, sure, they are collecting rent, sure, they are sending notices, but they also have to understand the challenges of the community. It's highly important for us that they don't become this machine that, comes the first, you haven't paid rent, that is your 72-hour notice. No, We work with each family. Our resident service staff played a big role in helping enforcing the rules. They are there to protect the clients, but also to help the residents understand this is what you agreed to do when you signed this agreement, this document. Let me explain, let me remind you, what are your responsibilities, also your rights. So in those conversations, what we have found out is that we can create that dynamic that is a mutual respect. You are a human being, so as I am as a site manager. And we try always to work in all our areas same way. Does it work 100%? Nothing is perfect. So let's start with that. Nothing is perfect. It works with the majority of them, yes. It works with everybody, no. There are some cases that unfortunately we have to escalate. But I have been with FHDC, I believe now for 18 years. Our average evictions per year, I think it has been maybe 2 or 3. Out of those, I guess 1 goes to court. If that is our success. When I entered the industry and I told this, I was saying, you don't know how to do property management. You should be evicting people. Yeah. So that's the mentality, because what? We brought property management from the market industry. We say 80 units per manager with no support. That works in the market rate when you are there to collect rent and smile. In the nonprofit, it's totally different. In our organization, we have top 50 units per property manager. 50 units is low, and I think we're gonna be a reduction on that because people is just not capable of managing the amount of stress and trauma that is out there. So again, Oregon Housing Community Service, that pro forma needs to be reviewed. Resident service, which is working along with property management, doesn't get paid most of the cases above the line. And if they get paid or we get any money, 10,000 top. Yes, good morning. Thank you, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question that's sort of related to that about investor confidence, if that's okay. We know that investors are getting spooked by things that are happening at the property management level. Do you think there is room, I'm going to start with Will, to create an Oregon-based credential to boost investor confidence here in Oregon for property management for mission-driven organizations?
Julia actually wants to talk about this one in particular.
So I have been a property manager probably for about 11 years. And I can tell you that I have been actually doing social work for that amount of time. I've been doing probably 50% property management and 50% social work. But I didn't realize I was doing that. I thought I was just doing property management. And so what we're finding is that a lot of property managers, they're certainly trained to follow the policy manual, give 10-day notices, give eviction notice, et cetera, but they have absolutely zero training when it comes to dealing with escalations, dealing with tenants that are also dealing with traumas, and just dealing with the stress that comes from dealing with the populations that we serve and that we're seeing. I think we're seeing these populations a lot more now since the pandemic, and a lot of the property managers are just not getting that training, which is what's leading to burnout, which is what's leading to people not wanting to be in this industry. They are not receiving any kind of training to support them in that aspect. So I think that it is really important for property managers in this particular area of the industry to be getting adequate training around social work, around dealing with escalations, and around getting trauma-based information as well, because they're not receiving that, and they're also not being supported when they're dealing with these escalations. Your typical, especially your typical site manager, the only support that they're typically getting is coming from their regional manager or from their portfolio manager. And that person typically is not going to be working with them when they're dealing with an escalation with a tenant. Maybe that tenant is struggling with a mental health issue. The portfolio manager is usually also not trained to deal with those types of escalations. So that's where we're seeing that there is a need definitely to have additional credentials and additional training. I think it'll also boost investor confidence, funder confidence, and even confidence within the community that the person that is servicing these properties is not just your typical property manager that's following a black and white policy, but rather somebody that is trained to deal with all of the wonderful complexities that come with serving these communities.
First, please don't take away my developer fee. It's the only thing that keeps me afloat. FHDC, I mentioned, was created in 1996, doing their own property management since then. How? Because of the developer fee. The board has the authorization to define where that money goes. And believe me, it doesn't go to a Mercedes-Benz for me at the end of the year. It goes to support all the services that pro forma is ignoring. So my first thing, I love that, but please don't take it that. Don't take that. Yes, yes. Yes. Now, education. We do bunch of education to our managers. I mentioned that we hire people with no knowledge. We want one thing maybe, that they have good rapport with people, customer service, if you will call it in the market industry. That's what we look for. But then the internal education starts. Our program, which by the way, I would like to offer it to everybody in this room, just with one note, is dedicated to our community. So it might not work for yours, but you can try it. And I'm open to share and sit down with any of you to go into details. But then we started taking this person and the technical skills, they can get it in like, what will you say, 3 months? And if they don't waste your time and money, move on. That's not the person that you want. It's the people skills that you have to develop. The usual property management that we know in the industry is manager here, residents here. You do what I told you. And if not, you're getting punished. No, our property management work like this. And I think most of us in the industry, that we are doing our own property management. That is why it's successful. I will call our property management financially unsuccessful, but humanly successful. Because we are taking care, not 100%, nothing is perfect, please keep that in mind, but we are taking care of our communities. Training staff in that area takes a lot of time. I will say that 2 years. But if at the first year you don't see something that is catching in that person, again, you need to say, is this the right person for us? We have built a curriculum based on equity, because we have been practicing equity forever. And by the way, that costs money. We have been practicing in everything that we do, from vendors, and now we have been trying forever to do in development. Oregon Housing and Community Services now taking the lead on making sure that we do more of that. But everything that we do is based on equity. And that's how we train people. And not many people understand that concept and wanted to practice, because it's hard. It's difficult for the soul too. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to add too that I definitely think there is potentially room for a credential. I think that, especially if it was more organized and official at a statewide level, and it had a decent curriculum and it was a well-respected credential, that could be potentially really effective. And similar to what Meg is saying, like our turnover rates are also very low. Our eviction rates, even across all of our PSH units, hover around 3 to 4%. And that's not just formal evictions, that's all asking anyone to leave for any reason. And so I do think that like using that type of data to also boost up investor confidence of saying, hey, if you do take this different approach and also, you know, carve out what type of funding you need to make sure that we can pay for it, per your point, that could be really effective. My only asterisk on this, because I've actually been asked this question like twice in the last quarter, is that it would take a lot of like resources, especially in my opinion, from the state level, and time and effort to build a credential that actually has the respect of the industry, versus, you know, if it gets rushed, then it's just another thing that's sitting on someone's resume. It doesn't necessarily have like the receipts, I guess, to go with it, to make sure that everyone in all parts of the industry, whether they're a PSH provider or someone that's going to partner on resident services or they're an investor, is actually going to believe in it. So, and I would imagine that would take a few years to do.
So I've got a note that some folks are tuning in, and so if you're going to ask a question, if you could come up here so we can have it on the record, that would be helpful. So. This one is directly into the recording.
So I'm wondering, at least for folks who are doing this in the Portland area, have you had any communication with PSU about their new program that they're talking about where they're training property managers? That's what they're looking at doing. And I wonder if there might be a connection that we could make between the state and between some of our educational institutions.
Yeah, and I have a question for Lisa.
I was going to say, I was actually not aware of that, so that would be great to get that information after this. Yeah, because that's another huge thing that, I mean, this is just within the general mental health and social work world in general of building the development pipeline, because a lot of the issues we're talking about today exist through all of our other staffing positions and other programs. So something like that would be huge. And I also think to some of the points, I can't remember your name, the person from Epic was talking about, that would address some of those things too. So that would be really valuable information to get.
We see all types of training for our industry. We see light tech classes, we see Fair Housing 101, we see dealing with the dark side of property management, we see 10-day, we see training for everything except for the customer service part, the de-escalation part, and the trauma part. Because you can get training for anything except for that. And that seems to be the area that we need to get constant training on.
Have you heard about any other university working in rural areas?
I haven't, but I think that U of O would potentially be a good place to look at that.
Perfect. Academia. Academia is not giving us what we need. Sorry. When I start working with FHDC, I have to put my certificate aside and say, man, I have no idea what I'm doing here. Because everything that academia taught me, couldn't practice it. It took me away from the mission of the organization. Nothing against academia. I still like it. I still, think that it has good things. But I'm sorry, I don't have faith on them. I with you, Julia. They have no idea. I'm sure they are going to put a very nice curriculum, very expensive curriculum out there, and that I'm going to sell it for one I can tell you I will share with you. And it's nothing about how to do a 30-day notice. So great idea. I hope PSU come to us and ask us. I haven't seen them. And that's the problem that I have with academia. Academia is too up here. Those who earn a certificate can tell that we go into a job and it's like, I know it all. This is my certification. I have it here. It's not working. It's not working. I would love to to be in contact with them just to see if we can push the agenda of, no, we're not managing buildings. We are managing human beings with trauma, with challenges, with drug addictions. That's what we need to learn. And I don't know if they are there. It's just me, but yeah. Thank you. And let's put up one more thing in there. Cultural specific organizations like mine. Are they gonna tell me how I'm gonna treat my own community when academia might be the way that we are in the way that we are today, with people of colors always being left behind, where we are not have even access to academia? Yeah, thank you, Liz. There was another question around that.
I'm just going to come to you.
It's a race.
So I know we're focusing a lot on property management, and that is so intently critical. So a few things I want to say. The developer fee, dear Lord, please don't take that away. No, but do acknowledge that our developer fee, which we have just started receiving for the first time in 20 years. So what am I investing that in? Asset management. So I'll call it, right? So I think we're saying the same thing, different terminology, right? Okay, cool. Don't touch my developer. Okay, so there's that. Please. The other thing about property management that I just want to question is one of our biggest cost factors is the property manager, yes, but it's our maintenance. I mean, there's a lot of maintenance work that's going in, and when we're asking for and putting positions out there, they're $30 an hour. I mean, and they're asking higher than property management wages. And so that's a big cost item for us that we're looking at. And how are we finding the right maintenance? And then overshadowing that, not overshadowing, but providing oversight by property management, by asset management. And you have to have all of it together to make a real successful project. And it doesn't always come together. Now, the resident services, we're talking a lot about asset management and property management. And I just want to go back and say it was about 12 years ago that Housing Oregon Opportunity Network also did something on resident services too, to understand the value of that type of a programmatic piece. That is a partner and a great aspect, but they don't always, this type of thing you were doing, Meg, that wasn't a good thing when I look at it sometimes. I mean, because there is some button heads. They actually locked me out of my own office when I was doing it. I mean, you don't do that to a redheaded tourist. But anyway, but I guess it's just a question that I've got is how are we supposed to align all of this when we're talking about property management and our maintenance cost, even just to pay for the maintenance cost of the staff? And I think it's a real challenge for our property managers to do that, but also shouldn't we be thinking about our maintenance and training them in these social skills too? So there are just some of those thoughts I have. I just wanted to throw them out there. So thank you.
And I want to remind folks that this afternoon, not to promote the OHCS class, but there is the NOFA engagement. So this is a perfect discussion to bring up there during that session.
Then I'll come back to you. Maybe you had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, so again, really good questions. Something I wanted to bring up earlier. So yes to the answer is the answer to like, does maintenance get included with all of these approaches, right? Like from our perspective, and one of the things I think that's made us successful in our own internal portfolio is that we look at a site as having a single team. There's one team on that site and they all have the same goal and they all have the same values. There are different people on that team that have very different boundaries and perspectives and like responsibilities that they're supposed to carry out, whether it's resident services, a mental health clinician, a medical staff member, property manager, a maintenance team member. But our approach is to tell everyone, hey, all of us are here to make sure that this community is thriving and successful and that people are staying in housing and that people want to live here and they're accomplishing what they want to do. And that we all have similar values around being trauma informed and DEI focus, stuff like that. Once people align that way and they build real relationships with each other, then the only real disagreement is how we're getting from point A to point B. And that, like, our maintenance team also, we're pretty proud of, because our turnover is very low in maintenance, and we kept a lot of the guys around. And even when we have been continually expanding, because we've been growing a lot in the last year or two. And a lot of that is kind of what I mentioned earlier about the property managers, which is that we actually advertise that part of the job. We're like, hey, this is what the team is like. All the guys here are really invested in this, and they all understand that they're actually part of service delivery. Like, some of the people are so isolated that the only people they see on a regular basis are the maintenance team. Right? And we tell the maintenance guys that all the time, being like, you should think about how you're showing up here. Now, that doesn't mean, oh, if there's a really intense situation, start acting like a total social worker. It means, hey, reach out to your other teams and partner with them. But it gives them a lot of pride, like, in the work that they're doing, and a lot of dedication to the actual people in the units. And it makes it easier than when we hire. We tend to hire through word of mouth, actually. And our team's now 12 people. And it's easier to find that because then people are like, oh, wow, compared to some of the cultures you can see in other construction or maintenance environments, it's really welcoming. It's really centering of, like, what our mission is. And I think that the guys tend to find that really motivating. So I don't know if you want to add anything.
I will say, when it comes to maintenance, it is really important to recognize your maintenance staff, because a lot of times they kind of get forgotten about. They're just coming in, doing work orders, dealing with the tenants, and that's about it. But they're actually your number one frontline worker. So I think recognizing them and making them part of your success is really important. So what we do when we have our meetings with maintenance is we always share feedback with them. Hey, this tenant said that you did this. You were awesome. They love our company because of maintenance. And so we share that with them, and we give them recognition constantly, because they need that as well. They need to feel that supportive environment. Because a lot of what I hear from property management a lot of times is that it is hard to keep maintenance people there, because they're not getting the recognition that they deserve. So we try to make that a really big point in our team, is that maintenance always hears all the great feedback that is said about them. And we listen to them as well. What challenges are you finding when you're going into these units? And a lot of time maintenance is just not really heard. You just kind of want them to go and fix that toilet and not say anything, but they're dealing with the tenant, they're seeing things too. And sometimes tenants are more likely to kind of give them the 411 than they are to the site manager. So it's important that they be recognized and be part of the success as well.
We use the same formula. We also train our maintenance staff. We have that team per property that is the resident service, the maintenance, and the on-site manager. So pretty much the same philosophy. It seems that we have some similarities now.
I didn't really have a question. I just wanted to put in perspective. If we're talking about any position and $25 an hour, that's 52,000. You all may have done this already, but it's 52,000 a year. And you consider 20% taxes, you're talking about 41,600. So that's 34,66 a month. And if we're talking about housing and staff, and you divide that in half, that's 1733. So about half of that is going to be going to rent. So I just want to put in perspective the $25 when we're talking about people being social workers, and to Liz's point, they're lawyers, they're, all of these things. So I just wanted to highlight that.
So I know there is a number of policy wonks in the room, and I just wanted to ask folks, what do we need from the state? And what do we need from the state? What do we need to do for a larger policy movement to invest in this area? What are some policy measures that we can, as Housing Oregon, work on to be implemented to support your initiatives?
Yeah, so there's a few different ones here that we're currently working on. I split it into a few different categories. So I'll kind of talk about like the on the ground situation right now, and what's happening to buildings that are either just coming online or have been online for a while and are now suffering from some of those effects I talked about earlier. We actually had approached the state in June to gain $250,000 to offer technical assistance to commercial property managers and other affordable housing nonprofits in this specific area to share what we're doing. And I think that that could be like a huge tool to provide to people across the state. And like, we're just, again, we're still a small outfit. The team is 5 or 6 people right now. But I could see having that band together, again, with other people like Meg's operation as well, to provide those types of technical resources and to provide a more centralized like repository of training, which might, again, be the antecedent to that credential that you were talking about earlier. Additionally, I think the other reality that and I'm going to be a little specific on the metro area here, is like when I'm talking to people like Washington County Housing Department and the Joint Office, recognizing that when you go to these sites that are 100% PSH or majority PSH, and they're going to provide the Metro bond dollars to actually fund the PSH services, realizing that for some of these sites, because of how bad shape the pro formas are currently in, that there might need to be some part of that contract that's an additional stipend to go towards the property management to fund this type of like service level. Because again, like, you can put in a really great PSH team on the site, but if they're not working well with the property manager or the property manager's under resourced, it's still going to fall apart. And we've talked to multiple other providers in the last quarter who have talked about that, and why, again, for me, it's like that single team thing of like, if we let any part of the team fall off the table, we're under resourcing them and the system is going to start to unravel. So
We definitely need more attention to property management from the state level. We need more access to mental health training for property managers, affordable access to mental health training. And we need a lot more funding when it comes to this area so that we can provide assistance to other nonprofits and to other property management companies for sure.
Yeah, I need to stand up for this. Because I have 2 words: pro forma reform. If we are not able to go deep into the pro forma and really get together, let's go, Oregon House and Community Service and the nonprofit sector, to Mayor Memorial Trust, to OCF, to all those foundations that can help us to do a deep analysis. We cannot do it individually, but we can do it together. But we need a deep analysis of the pro forma. What are we seeing right now in the affordable sector? No, for-profit property management companies are saying, no more of this. Let's go into development. That's where the money is. But they're not stopping there. They are also saying, I'm going to manage my own property. I have the expertise. I have been doing it for this owner that doesn't, care about me. I'm going to do it for myself. How we are going to position ourselves in this new market, in this new environment, is highly important. Is Oregon Housing and Community Service going to be our partner? Or is it gonna be like housing development, when, private developers say, oh no, if they nonprofits do it for $2,000, I'm doing it for $500. And Oregon Housing doesn't have any option. They need units on the ground. They say, 500, sure, why not? But the problem that we have today is because of that decision, because we haven't had the time to sit down and say, this is happening, this is real. We need a pro forma reform. We need to really look into that and to really say property management needs attention. The only people that was out there doing work when COVID hit was the nonprofit sector. Tell me one table where the private developers were coming and working with you. Oregon Housing. Nobody. We were there with you on the, trying to help the community. Now help us. It's the right thing to do. And I'm going to say it again, equity costs money. That's what we need to do. Sure, I can talk a lot about the policies. I can talk to you about all the things that I need, but as soon as you leave this room, I propose that we all come together and we fight for a pro forma reform. Thank you.
So unfortunately, we are at time, and someone else is going to come into this room and start a workshop. I'm sure that we can all talk about this all day. But I really wanted to say thank you for coming to this panel. Thank you, New Narrative. Thank you, Evolve. And thank you, Epic, for, we invited Roger to be here today, and unfortunately he couldn't make it. So we see you on the other side of the mountains, and we love you. So do you guys want to say any last words?
Sure. Yeah, just double down on everything that Meg just said. It's the long-term solution and is also one that will take some time to implement, but it has to be done. I think my final parting thing on this is when I look at Oregon and in particular the metro area, we're at this interesting intersection where voters have given us a lot of trust, right? They've given us hundreds of millions of dollars. They've been willing to think about progressive policies on camping bans, on how we look at this issue. And we have this opportunity to then pull through and actually make a difference in these areas. And particularly with property management, if we can't show up and change the situation, like I feel like every developer, every affordable housing partner I talk to, it's this same conversation over and over again. And we run the risk of someone looking at the system and saying, well, you all sold us a false bill of goods and this isn't gonna work, right? That things aren't getting better in the city. And like, you're not running your operations well enough, whatever secret soup you sold isn't actually good. And that will lose their confidence to ask for more investment in the future, because this is a problem that takes potentially decades to solve. And that's why I think that some of the policy stuff that we talked about has to be considered, or else it's going to be the detriment to us all.
So New Narrative's property management arm is going to be looking to onboard clients in the next quarter or two. So shameless plug, if anybody is interested in having those conversations about property management, let me know.
I'm not doing new onboarding. I don't want clients. And I'm not doing it because I don't have the capacity, real. But I'm here. If you want me to share everything that we have, all the technical skills, but also the curriculum that we have created, we are a support for you. To the owners, there is a conversation happening for around a year, I think, about organizing or getting together to form a nonprofit property management company. I'm all for it. One thing to the owners, listen to this. Property management is every day. You fit one toilet, 20 breakdown on Friday at 5 p.m. when everybody just wanna say, Friday, I'm going. So please be gentle with yourself, with your community, but also with your property management. Thank you.
Let's give it a round. Yeah.